All right, so let's remember the components of the cell so we don't forget. Now that we've gone over this 3 times, it might be important. Plasma membrane, cytoplasm, DNA, and organelles. I know you guys are going to be like walking around campus. Cells are made of, and you're going to start lining it out. You're going to get all memorized. Oh. So let's look at that cell membrane. The cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane, is a structural mosaic of proteins and lipids, right? We learned about the phospholipid bilayer last time. It functions as a selective permeable membrane and barrier. It separates the internal environment of the cell, that cytoplasm, from the external environment, okay? And there's a model that's given to understand this plasma membrane. It's called the fluid mosaic model. This idea is that the cell membrane can be considered a 2-dimensional fluid environment. I mentioned that a little bit last time about how I always saw it as like this very like stick figure type thing. And then when you start to realize that it's very, very fluid and it can move in all different directions. It has a much different perspective. It has a much different understanding of it. It's not something that's like solid stuck together. It actually can move, which allows information in the terms of molecules to get through it. So let's take a look at it. These are our phospholipids. What are our heads? Are they hydrophilic? They love water. And then our tails are hydrophobic. They get together. And then our other head is hydrophilic. The cytoplasm is cells are mostly water. Human organisms are mostly water. The cells inside, let's say this is the inside, there'd be water in here from the cytoplasm, and then there'd be water out here from the interstitial fluid that's between cells. Okay? So again, in more detail, we have the phospholipids, so we have the phosphate group on the head, and then we have these fatty acid tails, remember? That's what the lipids are. They have the fatty acid tails, okay? And these phospholipids are the most abundant component of eukaryotic cell membranes. And again, hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tail. All right, let's take a moment to review that.
All cell membranes have the same lipid bilayer structure. The bilayer consists of 2 sheets of phospholipid molecules oriented in opposite directions. The heads of the phospholipids face outward. They are attracted to the watery environments inside and outside the cell. The hydrophobic phospholipid tails are sandwiched between the heads. This minimizes their interactions with water.
So we know from before that there's more than just that phospholipid layer, right? The 2 layers. We know there's something more because at the beginning of our lecture we talked about these proteins. Well, in that phospholipid bilayer are proteins. They associate with the membrane and they carry out most of the membrane functions. So there are adhesion proteins that stick the cells together. Okay? They're embedded in this phospholipid bilayer, and then the other cell has it, and they stick it together. Recognition proteins that tag the cells as self. Okay? This is an example of this is this MHC molecule, major histocompatibility complex. We'll learn a little bit more later about the immune system and about how the body recognizes its cells as self. And when another cell gets in there that doesn't have self on it, the body wants to eat it up and spit it out. Okay? Receptor proteins, they bind to a particular substance outside the cell. For example, B cell receptors help the body eliminate toxins and infectious agents such as bacteria. So you can imagine that these receptor proteins are doing work, right? They're allowing things to get in and out of that membrane, okay? And transport proteins. These are passively or actively assist specific ions or molecules to move across the membrane. An example of that is ATPase synthase. And that is the energy making protein. Okay? We have to move. ATP is what we call as our energy currency of the cell, and we'll look at that later. And you'll hear a lot of ching, ching, ching for me as we make ATP so we can fuel our bodies. Okay? So these are some examples of those proteins that are in the cell membrane.
A lipid bilayer is the structural foundation for the plasma membrane. Proteins embedded in the membrane or at its surface perform vital functions. Click the labels for information about the role of each type of protein. Adhesion proteins help one cell adhere to another cell or to a protein component of an extracellular matrix. This is a ribbon model of the adhesion protein integrin. Communication proteins in the plasma membrane of one cell match up with identical proteins in the plasma membrane of an adjoining cell. Together, the proteins form a channel that connects the cytoplasm of the two cells and enables transmission of signals between them. This example is a gap junction. Receptor proteins embedded in a membrane are docks for diverse hormones and other signals. This is a ribbon model for a receptor for somatotropin, or growth hormone. Recognition proteins are identity tags by which cells recognize non-self and self. They are glycoproteins with sugar side chains projecting above the membrane. The example shown here serves as an identity tag on red blood cells. Passive transport proteins are channels that passively enable one or more substances to cross a membrane. Some are always open. Others have molecular gates that close and open in controlled ways. Active transport proteins are also called ATPase pumps. Energy provided by ATP makes them actively pump solutes across the membrane. The blue ribbon model is of a transporter that pumps calcium across the membrane.
Okay. You don't have to worry about every single protein that's in this animation. This is to give you a window into the proteins. The proteins that you need to know about are the ones that are listed in the PowerPoint that are underlined. Okay?